got a fairly good sized project to do here, and that is to replace the linkage bearings for the rear linkage. So this is the rear linkage arm, I think you call this, but it's the shock linkage for the rear tire. And so what happens is the shock actually connects to one of these, and then you have this pivots, and that's what gives you the ability to, it softens your suspension, and it gives you a little bit finer tuning capability as far as the height of the motorcycle. So what this has is this has pin style bearings. So I'll see if I can show you these. So these pin style bearings are inside here, and they're like little rollers. And as you can see right there on that, the actual track that these pin style bearings are running in are broken. So that's why we're having to replace the bearings on this shock linkage. So I've got a shock bearing linkage kit from Tusk, and so these run about $65 or so from Rocky Mountain. The other options is Pivot Works and All Balls, both sell similar products for around $70. I think they are probably a little bit upgraded from the Tusk, but I'm not too concerned. I think this is plenty for what I need. This isn't a motocross bike or anything, so it's not going to take a huge beating. And I'm guessing that this is probably the original bearing, so we're probably in good shape that way. So I'll just quickly go through that. I'm not going to really chat about it, but so you know what we're doing here, we're going to go ahead and put this shock linkage in. So there's a few different methods for removing bearings from one of these. So I'm going to use a couple of different methods probably for this. So we're going to start with just the big thing is to not damage this linkage. And so there's a couple of different methodologies. One of those is to use a couple of different sockets and your vise to actually remove those. And if you have an extra set of hands doing this, it can make things a lot easier. I wish I had my boys here today with me. Now if you get a lot of resistance doing this, you want to stop and figure out why. It shouldn't be terribly difficult to do this. So if you're getting a lot of resistance, stop and take a look at what's going on and make sure. And you can see here inside my socket, there's my bearing. So that's now pressed out of there. And you can see here we've done no damage to the race or to the seat where that bearing goes. So alright, so we'll move on to the next one. And again, in this one we've got a seal. Pop that seal out of there on both sides. And then I've got to find a socket that would be small enough to go in there. And you can see there that's got a little bit of play, but not much. And then I'm going to have to go to a little bigger socket here. In fact, I need to go bigger than that. So, yeah. Okay, so we'll run my vise back out. Okay, so I've got this pressed most of the way through. However, it's not all the way through. You can see here I've got one of the bearings. But we still have another one here. And you could use a blind bearing puller, but you can see it's just right there. But it's just sticking right below the surface. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this, set that in there, and then using another socket sitting on top of this one, I'll just give this a couple of taps. There we go. Those bearings are all removed from the linkage. And we'll press these back in with using basically the same technique. Okay, so I've got my bearing kit. So this is the first of these bearings. And so first thing I'm going to do is press this in. So I've got my linkage here. I've got it cleaned up as best as I could. I didn't want to go too crazy, but I want it to look nice. And so I'm going to run my vise in a ways here. I'm going to replace my soft jaws on here. And what I really want to make sure of is that this bearing sits really flush. Okay, so I'm just starting it by just giving it a couple little taps. And then making sure it's centered in my jaws, I'll just go ahead and press this in as far as I can. Again, using that smaller socket that I had. And something I'm being really careful of is that I'm pressing this in straight. I don't want this to go in skewed at all. Okay. And the other option is you can use this vise to press those in, and that's probably going to be a good idea for this. And what I'm trying to do here is, you can see that the bearing sits down a ways here. I'm trying to make that even between where this bearing sits down inside here on both sides. I think just a tiny bit more and then we'll be even. Okay, and if you happen to go a little too far, you can just, push from the other side. There we go. That's as even as I can get it. So then we've got a couple of seals here. And then what I want to make sure of is that these bearings are packed with grease. Okay, so they're a little shy on the grease. I mean, they can't really pack them from the factory perfectly, so you always want to pack them in pretty good. So what I'm doing is I'm getting big globs of this grease. I'm going to push it up in there as much as I possibly can. And this is a lithium grease that I'm using. It's a multi-purpose super white grease. I think it's Master Pro. I think it's an O'Reilly's brand or something like that, but pretty much all your auto parts stores will have it. You want a waterproof grease that's of good quality. This is a pretty decent quality stuff. So you can see there I've packed that in there pretty decent. Then I'll just make sure that all the pins are down. Okay, so I've got my little seals here, and there's a concave side and a convex side. In other words, there's a side that's flat and the one that has the indent. The indent goes in. So we'll take this and just place this seal. Some of these might be really tight. I think this one I can probably just press into place with my fingers, which I can. Okay. And then with that seal in place, I'll then put the race in there, and that's mainly to hold those bearings in place. So this is the race, and or collar, or whatever you want to call it, but it needs to go in there. And I'll try to work as clean as I possibly can, which basically means you end up wiping up a lot of grease multiple times. Okay, so now that one's pressed in and ready to go. So now we're ready to move to the others. So again, I'll just use this vise to do this for the most part.